war game anytime. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Any War Game Anytime. I'm Bozz, and today I'm bringing you episode 2 of the 40k 3rd edition starter set build series. So today we're going to talk about the printing process. So I finished all the printing for this project. I've got everything printed out and ready to be built and painted. So today I'm just going to talk a bit about the process of the printing itself and share with you guys some photos and a bit of video just so you can see what it was all about. So we'll start off with the Space Marines, and as you can see, they all came out really good, really good. I was very happy with how they came out. It was in 3 batches. I think I've got torsos and legs in one, and I've got shoulder pads in another one. I think I've got backpacks and a few other things. And of course, the land speeder as well. I was really, really happy with how well the land speeder came out. You can see from the photos that the supports everywhere, and some of them, especially in like the footwell of the cockpit, were a little difficult to remove. I had to get in there with a hobby knife, and I also had to make sure that I wasn't too heavy-handed because it can be so easy to accidentally use a little bit too much force and break off some of these delicate parts, especially if you remove these supports before they've cured. Now, for this land speeder, I actually cured it before I got to all those inner supports. Obviously, all the supports that you can see on the outside came off after the wash. And because I washed with hot water, it came off really quite easily. There wasn't much effort needed to actually get these supports off of any of these prints at all. But yeah, all those little delicate ones, I like to leave in place until after the print's been cured, just so they're a bit tougher. Because I have been known in the past to accidentally break off some delicate bits of some very intricate prints, usually that I'm doing on commission, which means I do have to, in fact, do the whole thing again, because I don't mind gluing things back together when they're for me, but when I'm doing it for someone who's paid me to do it, I'm going to do it absolutely perfectly, of course. Kind of moving along with the photos, you can see how well the rocket launcher Marine came out. And as you know from one of my previous videos, that is something that I was quite concerned about. Just not how well he'd come out, but just kind of getting him right. And yeah, devastated backpack and all that and beaky, but I still think he looks really cool, and I'm very happy to how everything came out of that particular part of the print. I've included a few little videos of the curing process, just in case people are curious, I suppose. I know not everyone out there has a 3D printer, and I know that people can be curious as to how the actual process works. As you can see, they're just sitting there on that circling platform and getting saturated with UV light. I cure prints of this size for 5 minutes, and I make sure that it's an even spread as well. I would turn everything over after 2.5 minutes. The things that stand up on their own, like you can see the Marine legs and the rocket launcher are standing up on their own, I'll actually lie them down flat for the first minute and cure their feet, just to make sure that there's no uncured resin anywhere, and then I'll stand them up and cure them for the remaining 4 minutes. I've just put a little video here about post-processing. So they've come out of the wash, and I'm just taking all the supports off. It's the most time-consuming process of the whole thing, but you can see they look really nice. And this is the first batch, the first of 2 Space Marine batches. The next batch will have all of their backpacks and weapons and things. The backpacks and weapons here are for the specialists. Moving on to the Dark Eldar, you can see some very cool build plates there again. I was very impressed that I was able to get the entire 20 warriors printed out over 2 builds. So they took not too much time at all. The most fiddly part for the Dark Eldar were all these little spikes and little add-ons and things. I ended up accidentally breaking quite a number of these tiny little pieces purely because they are so tiny. They're often smaller than the supports that are holding them up. But I managed to salvage enough of them so that I'll have enough to personalize all of these warriors. I think I ended up breaking one sword as well, but I've kept the pieces. I'll use glue and put it all back together. And once it's all together and painted up, it'll be unnoticeable. But really, truly, I was very happy that that was the only kind of breakages in these prints so far. Because as I said, it is quite a fiddly process when we're dealing with things of this size. Speaking of things that are small and quite fiddly, it's been about a month since I started printing, and life gets in the way. I've also got an actual job that I do, and I'm also a dad, and that's my full-time gig. But also, I can't help getting distracted sometimes when a project kind of takes my fancy. And one week, I decided, hey, I'd like to have an Imperial Guard army to play Epic Armageddon. So I printed out an Epic army just over a weekend because they are so tiny. So as you can see here, yeah, that's my 1700 points of Armageddon Steel Legion Imperial Guard. So I've now got that to paint up as well, which I'm working through slowly, but they were great. I was able to print out an entire battalion on one build plate because they are so tiny. But of course, being so tiny, I had to be so careful with my post processing, and it took a very long time. It took almost as long as the print time. I think the infantry themselves, a build plate full of them, so 60 or 70 figures, only took about an hour and a half to print. But they probably took as long to get off the build plate and have all the supports removed and washed properly. But yeah, it was a project that caught my fancy, and it's done. So I was able to get back into concentrating on my 40k third ed project. And so I got stuck into my jungle trees, which was really quite interesting because they were quite intricate, even though they weren't small. And they were kind of medium sized to large pieces. But of course, you can see kind of from the videos, the support structure of them made them quite a delicate process to remove. And actually, I had my first failed print on the resin printer in quite some time, trying to print the bases for these trees. You can see in the photos that I came to check on the printer, and 6 hours into the print, that's absolutely a failed print. The supports were all there, but there was nothing on them. And of course, you can see that the base was just too heavy for the supports, and it had come off. Luckily, my printer, the Creality Hallet 1, has a feature where you can turn on the light and cover the entire build plate at the end of the print to clean it, essentially, make sure there's no bits kind of stuck to the vet and floating around. So I was able to bring all of it out in one clean sheet, which was very good. And then I had to go back into the slicer and try and set them up a different way. These trees actually came pre-supported, and it was the pre-supported files that failed. It doesn't happen often, but you do need to check that these pre-supported files are actually supported enough. Now, I didn't. I trusted that they were, and in most cases they were. Everything else printed fine. The rest of the trees printed absolutely fine, but because, I don't know, maybe because these bases were so heavy, I just needed to go in and do it myself, and I did. I actually laid them down flat and made all the supports kind of right at the bottom, thinking, that'll be a really good sticking point. I'll have lots of adhesion to the build plate, and the supports themselves won't be very long, so it should be a bit stronger. Anyway, that was my reasoning. And lo and behold, it worked. I don't know if that was because my reasoning was sound or just because it did, but either way, I have my bases, I have my branches, and I have my leaves. And yeah, they're going to look really good when they're put together. I've kind of mock set up a few, and it's so extremely close to those trees that come in the actual box set. So I'm very happy with how they turned out. And you can see here, I've just got a little video with the curing process as well. So that's everything that I needed to print with my resin printer. So now we move on to the FDM printer. I started off printing the barrels because they were going to be a nice, easy print. They only took 45 minutes, I think, to do 3 barrels. And you can see from the video that it's a nice, simple process. Build them up. You know, it's very good to start a project with a win. And in fact, I've done these barrels before I'd done any of my resin printing, just because, I guess, because, like I said, it's good to start a project with a win. And I often find for myself the hardest part about a project is actually starting it. You know, I gather up all these files, I put them through the slicer, I get them all ready. I've made the last video about getting them all ready, and then I have to actually do the thing. So I find for myself that having an easy win sets me up really well. The next thing I did was the base for the land speeder. As you can see, it came out really well. There's a little spot there for a tiny magnet. There's also a spot in the land speeder itself for a magnet the same size, so I'll be able to magnetize them, which will make everything a whole lot easier. It shouldn't just randomly fall off. I'm quite happy with how that came out. It was a nice, simple thing. And next up were the templates. As you can see, the templates came out really nicely. They've got a nice pattern. I decided to go with these ones over some other ones that I found that were kind of squiggly lines heading out to the rim, so they weren't kind of solid, you could see through them. And the toss-up was, well, you know, you can see through them and then you can see what models are actually underneath them better than if it's just clear. If it's not clear, I mean, if it's solid. And that's true, but on the other hand, it would have made for a much weaker print. And I thought, you know, I don't want to have to be particularly precious with these things, and I also don't want them to break in transit or when I take them out or if I drop one of them on the floor. Like these templates, they're not going to break if they're accidentally dropped. And, you know, it's wargaming, stuff gets dropped, it's a thing. So I was really happy with the way they came out, and I'm just happy to have templates because I love playing games that have them. I think I talked about that a bit in the unboxing video. Moving on to the tank traps and the little barricades, as you can see, they came out really nicely as well. And again, these were simple prints. These prints took a couple of hours, and they probably used about 20 grams of filament. And filament comes in a kilo spool, so I'm really not using very much here at all. The piles of rubble, again, also came out really nicely. They were a bit longer, they maybe took 3 hours because they are a bit more solid. And I think I ramped the infill up to about 50%, just because I did want them to be a bit more solid. And, you know, they came out no problem. They printed really well. I've done a handful of modifications to my Ender 3 V2 that just make it a lot more reliable. If there's any interest at all in hearing more about that, I can do a separate video about the upgrades I've done to my printer and kind of how I integrate them to make it a much more reliable beginner's printer, because this is an entry-level printer and it is a very hands-on process doing filament printing anyway. So I've done a couple of things to make my life easier and to make it a more enjoyable process for myself. On to the biggest print in terms of time, and probably what I was most excited to print, apart from the models themselves, the ruins. So I took a series of videos at different stages of the printing process for the ruins, just to kind of showcase how they come up. I used tree supports, as you can see, and the whole thing took just under 24 hours, I think. I had my printer sped up to about 150% after the first couple of layers are done, and I know that adhesion is working and all that sort of thing. And yeah, I just kind of love watching it work. There's something very satisfying about watching something being built up from a spool of plastic. It's very science fiction, it's very Star Trek, and yeah, I can't get enough of it. It's even wilder watching something kind of growing out of a vat of resin. I can't think of anything that would have delighted me more as a child than knowing that this technology was going to happen a lot sooner than the next few hundred years, like in Star Trek.
Okay, here it is. It's finished. It took, I don't know how long it took. It was turned off. It took around about 24 hours, I think. And supports are popping off even as I'm taking the magnetic sheet off. But yeah, it looks really good. Everything's kind of printed as it should. Very impressed with the quality of the file and how well it's come out on the Ender 3. Looks really good. And I should reiterate too, this was a free file. I didn't pay anything for this. This is just something that somebody's made up and popped up there for people to use. And yeah, you can see a bit of the layer lines and everything, but once it's base coated, you don't see these layer lines and all this lovely kind of wall damage detail and everything. It comes out really nicely. And of course I'll move the supports off and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm super happy with how good that's come out. And I think it was the largest print in terms of time for this project. So that's done now. So we're almost to the end of the printing out stage of this project, which is very cool. So stay tuned for more.
I mentioned before about distractions and getting distracted. Well, my epic Armageddon army wasn't the only distraction that I had during this time. I started playing Helldivers 2, like most of the rest of the population, a little while ago, and I love it. And I thought, you know what would look really cool on the tabletop? There's some Helldivers. And so I found some files, and there's a couple of really nice ones out there, including quite a few free ones. So yeah, I found some files, and I jumped onto Army Forge on one-page rules and kind of wrote myself up a 1.5k list, just, you know, to kind of start with. And yeah, I printed up a small force. So I've got 3 units of Helldivers and a unit of turrets and the next 2 suits. And yeah, I spent 4 or 5 days printing them out and painting them up. And I think they look really cool. I haven't debuted them yet. I'm going to be debuting them this Wednesday at my weekly game. So hopefully they do well. And I just think they look so cool. So anyway, moving on from that distraction. So that's it. That's everything built from the box. As for the box itself, I remembered that I have a Cadia Stands box that I got when that came out, which, by the way, I still haven't even finished building. I've still got at least 10 guardsmen to build, and I don't know what else. And, you know, I've also got a now useless deck of command cards and whatnot, but that's a whole nother thing. The point is that I've got a nice empty box of a similar dimension to the third ed starter set box to use. So you can see I've kind of populated it with a few things already. I've got my third edition rulebook that's going in there. I've printed out the README first. I've got my templates. I've got my Dark Elder and my Space Marines waiting to be built. The terrain's in there as well. I don't know that I'll be able to fit the ruins in. I think the ruins will be a bit too tall to go in there. But you know what? That's just how it goes. If I have to take the ruins separately, then that's absolutely fine. And here's everything all laid out. So the next part of the process is building everything. So I'm going to be taking some time. I've got all my bases, I've got all my bits and pieces, and yeah, my next video is going to be building the Dark Elder, building the Space Marines, putting the trees together, and getting it all set and ready to be primed and painted, which will be another video again. So that's all for now. I'm really enjoying this process. It's so cool seeing it all come together, and I hope you're all enjoying it too. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, go where the game is good.